Hello and welcome back to my library. Today we're going over all of the books that I read in the month of April, of which there were less than usual. I did move at the beginning of April, so my life was kind of chaotic for a couple of weeks there, and as a result my reading slowed down, but not by a crazy amount at least. I still read quite a few books. Sadly, not as many good ones though. I feel like the majority of my month was skewed in the 2.5 to 3 star range, but I did have a couple of good ones, so let's get into the books. But first, as always, we start with the stats. So in April, I finished a total of 13 books. I DNF'd 2 and soft DNF'd 1, which was a grand total of 4,727 pages with 47 hours of audiobook listening. The format of these books was only one singular physical book, my bad, 8 audiobooks, 4 ebooks, and 0 mixed media, which is not like me. I'm almost always a tandem reader, but last month I didn't do a single tandem read. Super weird of me, but I guess I just wasn't in the mood for that. And then in terms of genres, I read 3 fantasy books, 2 paranormal, 1 historical fiction, 4 horror novels, 2 sci-fi, and 1 contemporary romance. So let's start with the DNFs. I DNF'd Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, I think is the author's name. This was for the Toronto Lesbian Book Club, and I was not vibing with this book at all, which I'm so sad about because it had been on my TBR for so long, since 2021, and it was one of those books that I just kept thinking about for years, and I finally had a reason to pick it up, and I did not like it. I didn't get very far in. I think I only read, oh god, maybe like 15 pages, and I did not like the writing style whatsoever. I thought it was so dry and boring. I felt like I was reading a textbook. It was awful. Maybe it would have been better over audio, but this was an ebook, and I just couldn't do it. I could not lock in for any amount of pages, so sadly DNF'd that one. I also DNF'd Love is a War Song by Danica Nava. I read her other book, The Truth According to Ember, sometime last year, and I liked it but didn't love it, but I did see potential for this author, so I tried her newest book and really didn't like this one at all. I don't expect main characters to ever be perfect or completely unflawed. I think that would make for a very boring book. However, there are certain flaws that I just personally can't deal with, and people not taking accountability for their actions is a very big one for me, and that was the case with this book. So while I know that she would have learned and grown from that experience, I didn't care enough to stick around to find out how. And then the one that I am soft DNFing is Daggermouth by HM Wolfe. This is the newest and hottest buzzy book that everyone's talking about. It's a dystopian romance, very dark, very gritty, and I was loving the first like 25% or so. But by the halfway mark, it was feeling very dramatic and just like over the top writing, very insta-lust, which I'm not a fan of. So I wasn't really enjoying it towards the middle of it, but I've read close to 300 pages of it, so I didn't want to completely abandon it. So I figured I would just put it on pause for a while and then come back to it later on and see if I'm more in the mood for it around then. But for the time being, soft DNF and read about half of it. I read no nonfiction this month, which means 0 books are unrated. So moving on to the 2.5 stars, of which there were 4, unfortunately. I read The Baba Yaga's Assistant, which is a graphic novel that had been on my TBR since 2021. This was my backlist pick for the month, and I didn't hate this book. It was fine. I think the art was really cute. I liked the general story, but overall I felt nothing for this book. I thought the writing was really bland. The plot was almost fun, but not quite. And none of the characters, aside from the witch, stuck out to me in any way whatsoever. Same for The Sad Ghost Club, which is also a graphic novel that was on my TBR since 2021. Very similar feelings towards this one. It was almost good, but everything about it was just super bland. Good ideas, cute art style. I felt nothing for it though, sadly. Horsefly is one that I'm super sad about because I bought this book brand new, and I never do that. It is super rare for me to buy a book brand new at full price, but I was at an indie bookstore that I love last year and I saw this there. It looked so cool. It's a Canadian author, it's translated from French, and the concept is so cool. This is about biochemically engineered horseflies used as warfare, and that is such a cool idea, but this book was so boring. It's told in 3 different POVs. One is a scientist in the 1940s who's on the team that's using these horseflies as warfare in World War II. The second POV is the grandson of one of the men in the 1940s POV who's being hunted by one of these horseflies. And the third POV is actually the horsefly, and that was cool as fuck. That part of it was so interesting. I loved the perspective of the horsefly. It was creepy and almost sensual. The way that the fly was talking about its prey was almost sexual in nature, and it was so disturbing and disgusting. And that's exactly what I wanted from this book, and that part of it was so good, but it was less than a quarter of the book. The rest of it, between the two other POVs, was so extremely boring, and I didn't care about any of it. So this was definitely difficult to get through, but it was so short that I just finished it anyways, and it's also a book on my shelf, so I wanted to at least finish the book. But sadly, this was not a great book for me personally. I'm probably going to keep it though, because first of all, like, it's very short, so it's not taking up much space, and I also love the cover. And my last 2.5 star was The Body by Bethany C. Morrow. This is the third book that I've read from this author, and I think I am done with this author now. I want to like her books because I love her ideas, but I never like the execution. This one is a horror novel about a Catholic couple or Christian, whatever they are, and one of them breaks their vows, and their church people start kind of being possessed and trying to kill them to force them to atone for their sin. And it's just this whole long, like, religious metaphor thing. It was kind of a lot. The possession aspects were kind of cool, but the vast majority of this book was just centered on, like, adultery and like the idea of sin rather than the possession parts of it, which was deeply uninteresting to me. I really didn't care about the drama in here, and it was just a whole bunch of whining. Understandable to be whining, but it was still kind of annoying after a while. So I didn't love that one, sadly. My 3 stars include The Seventh Veil of Salome by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, who is one of my favorite authors. However, this is not my favorite genre. If there's not some kind of fantasy, sci-fi, or horror element to it, I'm probably not going to be super interested, but I wanted to read this one anyways because I do love this author. And while I don't think that it was a bad book, I can totally see why others would like it. It was so not my kind of book, and I was so bored throughout like the entirety of this book. There were some good elements to it, mainly just her writing is phenomenal, of course. I did like the characters, and the setting was cool. It's like 1950s Hollywood, something like that. Whatever era it is, it's like the golden age of Hollywood, and that was wonderful to read about in that time period. It was very atmospheric, and I love that for it, but the actual plot of it was just not for me. It was really uninteresting for a lot of the times. If there was even just like a singular ghost in here, it would have been better, but at least for my taste. But it was just a straight up historical fiction, which is not for me. But I do want to read everything by this author at some point, so I'm glad that I've picked it up anyways. I gave 3 stars to Faebound by Saara El-Arifi, and I'm so sad about it because I love The Final Strife so much. That's one of my favorite fantasy series in the entire world. And I know that it's not really fair to expect an author to do the same thing over and over again, and that would also get really boring. But I do think it is fair to expect the same quality. But on the other hand, The Final Strife and Faebound are different genres. The Final Strife is straight up like epic fantasy, whereas Faebound is more fantasy romance. So of course the writing styles are going to be different, but Faebound really did feel like it was a debut. It feels like her writing took like 10 steps back in terms of quality. It was so much less engaging and interesting, and I liked the romance but didn't love any of the romances in it. I liked the characters but didn't feel much for any of them. The plot was cool but couldn't really keep my attention throughout the majority of it. It was like all of these ideas were on their way to being good, but none of them quite got there. So that was a 3 star for me, and I'm not going to be carrying on the series either, which I'm sad about because I do love the idea of having both fairies and elves in one book. You don't usually see that, and I liked the magic system quite a bit. I was really interested to see where things went in that regard, but the rest of it wasn't interesting enough for me to want to continue it. My last 3 star was This Cursed House by Del Sandeen, which is a gothic horror set in, was it 1930s, like New Orleans? Something like that. 1960s New Orleans. And I think the tagline on Storygraph is the perfect description of this book. But it says, in this Southern Gothic horror debut, a young black woman abandons her life in 1960s Chicago for a position with a mysterious family in New Orleans, only to discover the dark truth. They're under a curse and they think that she can break it. This sums up this book well enough without me spoiling it by accident, so I'm going to leave that synopsis there. But yeah, I liked the idea of this book. I think it had some really interesting concepts and plot directions, but I felt like the plot didn't go far enough. Like, there were some really horrific elements to it, but nothing went quite far enough in that regard. It felt kind of half-baked a lot of the time. I liked the characters quite a bit. I thought they were all really interesting, and I liked their dynamics. This family was so fucked up, and I really enjoyed the ways in which they were fucked up because it was wild and took me on some turns that I did not expect at all. The setting was great. I liked this kind of crumbling gothic manor. The New Orleans part of it was also really good as well, but the general creepy atmosphere wasn't quite hitting. It was almost hitting, but still didn't quite get there. And by the end of the book, I was just so over it that I didn't even really care about the whole big reveal at the end, but It is what it is. I didn't dislike this book, but it also could have been a lot better. I only have 2 3.5 stars. The first one being Frendo Lives by Adam Cesare, which is the sequel to Clown in a Cornfield. I don't have much to say about it. I think the first book was a lot better. I did like book 2, but not enough to want to continue the series, so I think I am going to stop the series here. This book, while it was good, it was well written and well paced and everything, and the characters were still really good. It didn't feel like it was needed, and just kind of felt like it's trying to be Scream, where the Scream franchise is ridiculous, where it has so many movies of the same thing happening to the same person over and over and over again, and it's completely unrealistic. But Scream is aware of that, and they're making fun of themselves for doing that in a way where it works so well, where this book feels like it's trying to do that, but it's not quite getting there. So instead of feeling more tongue-in-cheek, it just kind of feels bad. Nothing was really believable and just kind of felt like drama for the sake of having drama. And while I still liked the characters, there wasn't quite as much heart in it as well. And my other 3.5 star was Satisfaction Guaranteed by Karelia Stetz-Waters. This is a contemporary romance about 2 people who kind of inherit a sex toy shop together. One of them was already an employee there, and the other one is the niece of the woman who owned it. Now the 2 of them are trying to save the toy store together, and of course falling in love along the way. I'm reading this one for a vlog project that I'm working on where I read books set at adult toy stores. So I'm going to leave my thoughts on it for that vlog, which would hopefully be coming out soon. Hopefully by the end of May. We'll see how that goes. I had 3 4 stars, starting with The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne, the second book in the Bloodsworn saga. This was phenomenal. I did like book 1 better. I thought it was more interesting in terms of the plot, but based on the plot on book 2, I'm so excited to see what happens in book 3. I think it's going to be so good. I loved seeing the direction of the characters and how a bunch of characters that we met in book 1 are all kind of meeting up in different ways. There are some schemes and plots and a whole bunch of things that are coming to fruition that I'm so hyped about. I can't wait to see how this series ends. But yeah, I just can't really say much about this book because it is the sequel, and any of my thoughts that I have would spoil book 1, so I'm just going to leave that there. But fantastic book, just not quite as good as book 1. I gave 4 stars to Married to the Alien Cowboy by Ursa Dax, which is book 1 in the Cowboy Colony Mail Order Bride series. Fun fact, my boss at my new job is actually married to Ursa Dax. I'd heard about her years ago, like I've just kind of seen her name around, but I had no idea that first of all she was Canadian, and second of all that she was so local to where I am. No idea that was a thing, but that was a cool fact. So since learning that, I've been wanting to get into her books, and I finally picked up my first book by her and had a blast with it. This was completely ridiculous in the best way possible. It was exactly what I wanted from the genre. It was silly and fun and so heartfelt. I loved the banter between the main characters. It was miscommunication, but in a really fun way. So the plot is the main character is a human, but she is completely broke after her mom passes away. So she ends up borrowing some money from a loan shark, but then can't pay it back. So she's now on the run from them and ends up signing up for this mail order bride thing where she's going to a different planet to marry an alien that she has never met and doesn't even know what the species of alien looks like, but she's desperate to get off the planet and hopefully be safe, so she goes, and hilarity ensues from there. I love the miscommunication in here because the 2 of them they're just different species, so they don't know what the other is trying to say with certain body language and hand gestures, so there's a lot of assuming what the other person thinks they mean, and then they end up being completely wrong. It's just so fun and hilarious. I had such a good time with this book, and I can't wait to get into book 2. And then I also gave 4 stars to The Keeper of Lonely Spirits, which was a beautiful, heartfelt book about grief. I love books about grief. This one's about an elderly man who is actually immortal. He's been around for about 200 years. He's from Ireland, but after his husband passed away, he just couldn't stay there anymore. So he's been wandering around the US for the last couple decades, finding lonely ghosts and helping them to move on. But when he gets to this one town, he ends up making friends with a few people and gradually starting to put down roots, even though his biggest fear is to get close to people again and end up getting hurt. This was such a beautiful book. It deals with some pretty heavy topics. There's lots to do with self-harm and suicidal thoughts, loss of a parent, that kind of thing. There's a whole bunch of heavy topics in here, but they were handled so beautifully. This book was phenomenal. I think the first half of it was a bit stronger than the last half. I didn't have quite as much of an emotional impact by the end of it that I was hoping to. That's why it's a 4 star instead of a bit higher, but it was still such a great read, and I'm so happy that I picked picked it up. Severely underhyped. I hope this book gets more hype around it because it was just so well done. The writing was beautiful and it was so touching as well. Speaking of books about grief, my only 5-star of the month was Rules for Ghosting by Shelly J. Shore. This one is about a Jewish trans man who is a birth doula, but his family runs a funeral home and they need help for a while, so he goes back home to help them out, which is extra bad for him because he can actually see ghosts. So it's not the best place for him to be, but he does want to help out his family, and it also helps that there is a very cute man who's also working there. I loved this book so much. It was so well done. It was so beautiful and heartwarming and touching and sad. It was so sad, but more in a bittersweet kind of way. There were some extremely touching moments in this book that just brought me so much joy. This book made me cry multiple times. I loved it. I can't say too much about it because the things that I loved would kind of spoil the book, so I am going to leave that there, but I do hope that everyone picks up this book if you can handle books about grief. Now before we finish up, let's get into the superlatives. The best book, of course, was Rules for Ghosting, my only 5-star. The worst book I'm going to say was Baba Yaga's Assistant. Biggest surprise I would say would be Married to the Alien Cowboy, because I had no idea that Ursa Dax was so funny. This book was hysterical. It made me laugh so hard. Biggest disappointment goes to Horsefly. I was so hyped for this book and it was kind of a letdown. Most memorable, I don't really have too many that are like a super standout for most memorable, but I'm going to go with Satisfaction Guaranteed because of the vlog that I'm working on, and it's not very often that I find books at adult toy stores, so that was kind of cool. Most forgettable is kind of a lot for this month, but I think I'm going to go with The Body. It's just not one that I see sticking with me at all. Best audiobook I would say is The Keeper of Lonely Spirits. I loved the narrator for this one. The accent was really good and I liked how they kind of changed their voice a bit for the other characters in the book as well. And finally, prettiest cover has to go to Faebound. This cover is just so stunning. I love it so much. I wish the book was better, but it is what it is. But that'll do it for my April wrap up. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I've read and what you thought of them. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if not, then let me know what the best or worst book that you read last month was. I'd love to hear that as well. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day and I'll catch you in the next video.